What's up, everyone? Matt Gajewski here, back again with the College Basketball Daily Show. Today we are talking Friday, February the 21st. Coming off a mid-major dominated Thursday night. We'll break that down briefly before we get into today's games. If you enjoy the video, I'll ask you to like, subscribe, comment, anything that would help the channel. It does a lot for me, so if you've done any of those things, thank you. It does mean a lot, as we are a small channel trying to work our way to 1,000 subscribers and hopefully not go broke in the process. All right. Yesterday, up at the top, there wasn't too much to discuss. A couple Big Ten games, largely meaningless. Ohio State basically the biggest of underdogs to make the tournament at this point among teams that actually still have a chance. They dropped a home game to Northwestern, which is probably going to end up being like a quad 3 loss when it all shakes out, because Northwestern's lost their two best players, or two of their top 3 best players, I should say. They still have Martinelli, who's a wagon, but you can't lose games like that if you're Ohio State and if you want to make the tournament. So I'd be shocked if we see them. USC disgraced themselves again, this time against an awesome Maryland team. It was a tough spot going across the country. Maryland is an awesome team in the Big Ten, but USC they basically just continue to play musical chairs with their rotation. I'm not really sure what to say. At some point, I think we can pretty confidently say you shouldn't be benching Desmond Claude for guys like Shelley. But I can also say, to Musselman's credit, I guess, defense, they're not very good. And the definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting a different result. At least he's not doing that. But I mean, I still don't know if putting freshmen over like proven commodities on the floor is the best path to winning. Anyway, we had some pretty impactful outcomes in the mid-major ranks. We were a little up and down in this area last night, but we didn't bet all these games either. North Alabama ends up losing to Lipscomb. Lipscomb returned Asman to the lineup, which was just kind of, we'll run into these on both sides sometimes. Like Lipscomb returns a key contributor. When we took it, that obviously wasn't factored in. When he returned, the line moved. So we ended up eating a bad number, and then Lipscomb ends up covering. They're a good team as it stands. So on Tuesday, we ran into the exact opposite where, Illinois had a bunch of guys sick, and we were on the opposite side of that, which worked in our favor. So it goes both ways. You just have to ride these waves. Otherwise, in the AEC, there were a lot of impactful outcomes. Both favorites, so 1, 2, 3, 4, there was a logjam at the top. They all played each other. Bryant got upset by Vermont, and Maine got upset by Albany. So now we have a continued logjam where probably the best teams in the conference are not near the top. It's still, one game separating them, but a lot to be determined left on the schedule for these teams as we move forward towards March Madness. Only a couple games left in those conferences because a lot of them start earlier than Big Ten, SEC, whatever else. So we move to Friday. Friday is generally dominated by the Horizon. We have a lot of Ivy League teams play on Fridays. So it's a mid-major dominated slate, but we actually have 2 elite games at the top at the least. And I think you could argue maybe 3. We start in the Big Ten. Oh, before we get there, if you or somebody who has a gambling problem, please call or text 1-800-GAMBLER. You got to be 21 or older to play in most areas. Cool. Michigan State, Michigan. Biggest home game for Michigan in quite some time. I can't even remember. Got to go way back. But they are a 3-point home favorite. The total in the game sits at 152. And this is a spot where Michigan State is taking money. This opened at 3.5. Money coming in on Michigan State, which makes some sense to me. We'll get into why. No major injuries, just Sam Walters for Michigan. So not any main contributors. Resume-wise, Michigan State's now 3-1 against top 25 teams. They have a pair of wins over Illinois, which is not aging all that well considering Illinois' recent play. And they also beat Purdue, number 13, also not aging that well. I mean, those are 2 really good teams. So you have 3 wins, still over top 25 teams, but I don't know. You could poke some holes if you wanted to. Outside of that, they do have a loss to Kansas. That's another team who's playing really bad right now. They're 24. A couple questionable losses. Memphis at 48, UCLA at 56, Indiana at 54. Michigan has a lot of these same qualities. They're 2-1 against top 25 teams. They beat Purdue and Wisconsin. That's 13 and number 7. They have some questionable losses as well, so this is not unique to Michigan State. Michigan lost to Wake Forest at 62, Oklahoma at 50, and Minnesota at 85. That was an overtime, but it is the most egregious loss on either of these schedules. Stylistically, anytime Michigan steps on the floor, your first question has to be, how are teams going to defend Vlad Golden and Danny Wolf? Both these teams are tall. Michigan State actually is top 20 in effective height. They're actually top 30 in rebounding as well. So on paper, they actually match up fairly well against Michigan. This Michigan State team does play with size. And then you have two teams that sort of play different styles of basketball. Michigan State can't shoot, but they're aware of this. 354th in three-point percentage. They know this is a weakness, and they're shooting three-pointers at the 334th highest rate. So credit to Izzo. He knows they can't shoot. They're not trying to. The problem is in this matchup, you have a pair of 7-footers on the other side with elite rim protection, and that defense holds up inside against some of the better competition. Michigan has an ability to score inside and out. They're 65th in three-point percentage. They have two players, Trey Donaldson and Damari Burnett, over 40% from beyond the arc. And all three of Michigan's bigs can shoot at least 36%. That causes spacing problems for opponents on defense when you can drag bigs out to the perimeter. The big issue with Michigan is this team is bottom 35 in turnovers committed. Big reason they've dropped games. How does Michigan State line up against this? Well, they're only 234th in turnovers forced, so maybe this isn't quite as big of a factor as it had been in previous games. And the last note I have, I'm still not in love with the Michigan State rotation. Izzo has trimmed the fat a little bit, but I think that was more because of illness and injury than anything else. In their last game against Purdue, a highly competitive game, one they ended up winning, but still not one they ever really had in check until the very end. He didn't play a single guy over 30 minutes. I still think that's going to come to bite them against better competition because some of these players are awful that are in the rotation. And honestly, it's a testament to how good Michigan State could be up top because they have some elite players and some strong, talented players that get on the floor. I just don't think they're playing quite as much as they should be. Maybe he's saving them for March. I'm not sure the answer, but that is at least a concern I want to mention. I wanted to take Michigan as this opened. It just came in too far. We make this about 2.5 points. I did not want to take Michigan State at any point, so I was hoping this might come down. It has, predictably. So now you're seeing this at 3, and it's juiced. It's still taking money towards Michigan State. This might come in at 2.5. At that point, I'll have to make another decision. That's where we make the line ourselves. If it gets to 2, I'm probably going to go on Michigan. We'll see where this shakes out. That is my lean. If you force me to take it, I would take Michigan right now, but we will wait and see what happens. Next up, Big East tilt on a Friday. Marquette plays Villanova. Should be a fun one. Marquette hits the road. They're a 2-point favorite. The total's 142. No major injuries in the game. It's been a weird slate of games like over the last month for both of these teams. Marquette went on a nasty 3-game skid. It was 2 against the better teams in the competition, St. John's, Creighton of the world. And then since then, they've beat up on the 2 worst teams in the conference, Seton Hall and DePaul, which makes them, I guess, somewhat of a bounce back candidate. But still, they're 3-2 against top 25 teams. They beat number 7 Wisconsin, number 13 Purdue, and number 15 Maryland. Pretty impressive. They do have a loss to number 79 Dayton. So it's an overall respectable body of work. It's just the optics with Marquette have not been great of late. Villanova's 1-2 against top 25 teams. They have a shocking win over St. John's that happened last week. St. John's took an egregious amount of threes, over 30. So I'm not surprised that was the outcome. I think St. John's maybe had better paths to victory that they didn't take, kind of giving the game to Villanova, if you will. And this Nova team just has flat out inexcusable losses. Like, I don't know how you could possibly ever justify this. I would have put Neptune on the curb the second they lost to Columbia at 250. His body of work is too bad to be continually losing games like this. Columbia is in, I believe, last place in the Ivy League. Anyway, they lost to 83 St. Joseph, number 104 Virginia, 81 Georgetown, and 81 or 84 Providence, who's down like 6 players right now. Just absolutely egregious output from this Villanova team that I don't truly have the answer for. This is a rematch. They played on January 24th. Marquette won that game 87-74. which was a fairly predictable win. Marquette won largely through the turnovers, and they won the foul battle pretty effectively. Stylistically, in this game, it's interesting to evaluate Marquette because they're actually 79th in effective height, but they're outside the top 200 in rebounding. They've made a little bit of a tweak here. Ben Gold has begun to cede minutes to Royce Parham. It hasn't really amounted to much, honestly. So Ben Gold went on that horrible stretch where he didn't have a rebound for 60 straight on-floor minutes, which I'm not defending. That is an effort thing. Ben Gold needs to give better effort on the court. If you were going to play 60 straight minutes without a rebound, rebounding to some degree is a talent thing, but it's also an effort thing. If you have 0 rebounds in 60 minutes, I'm going to question your effort. So I don't think the Royce Parham switch, at least the few minutes that have begun to move that direction, are a bad thing. I will say Gold did have 8 rebounds in the first matchup against Nova, so that is what it is. Marquette for the second straight year, very little interior presence, or at least a limited interior presence. And it's much different than last year where Oso couldn't shoot from three, so you didn't have to defend him outside the paint. This is the exact opposite. Ben Gold never goes into the paint, so you don't have to really do anything to get rebounds. Anyway, Villanova is the better shooting team by a pretty wide margin. They're 37th in effective field goal percentage and 4th in three-point percentage. Marquette is 136th in effective field goal and 242nd from three. Now, there is a big gap on defense. Marquette is inside the top 100 in interior defense. They're pretty good at perimeter defense as well. They force a million turnovers. Villanova's outside the top 150 in both interior and perimeter defense. That turnover margin was a huge problem in the first matchup against Villanova. And I still think Marquette is due for positive shooting regression, and pretty significantly too. I'm not sure what's gone on with Cam Jones. He shot 40% from three last year. He's at 31.5%, throwing up bricks. I have no explanation. Joplin's down from 36% to 31% as well. These are the two guys that shoot the most threes on the team by a mile. You actually look at Chase Ross, Ben Gold, Stevie Mitchell. They're mostly constant in their three-point percentage. Stevie Mitchell's actually way up from a year ago. The problem is they just don't take a lot of threes. Like Joplin and Jones are your shooters, and they're playing horribly. So I'm not sure what to make of this. The model, based on Marquette's recent play, actually makes us closer to -1, which is where it opened. I think, the little I know better in me thinks Marquette is much better than Nova on paper. I can't explain their poor shooting. We've literally seen better shooting from all of these. And maybe it's just the fact, Cam Jones and Joplin are higher up the scouting report. Prior, you had Kolek and Oso to create opportunities for you. You got more open looks, and maybe that's it. But anyway, I hesitate here. I would take Marquette if you force me, but I can't because of where mathematically this comes out. It's honestly closer to a pick 'em, a -1 in favor of Marquette rather than -2. So we will pass and move on to the next game. Dayton takes on Loyola Chicago in the A-10. Should be a fun game. Everyone kind of just chasing VCU in this conference right now. These teams are tied for third, so it is a big game in the conference. Both of them are 8-5 in conference play. It's a rematch. They played on January 18th. Dayton won 83-81. They were at home, but it took overtime. I will say they did not have Posh Alexander in that game. And somehow they did not shoot as well as Loyola, but they were able to overcome that by turning over Loyola 19 times and drawing 25 fouls. So they ended up getting it done in kind of a greasy way. There's no major injuries in this game that we're expecting. As far as resume-wise, Dayton is 5-5 against top 100 teams. Pretty good resume. They beat Marquette. They beat Northwestern, which might not look great, but Northwestern was at full strength at that point. You had Brooks Barnheiser and Jalen Leach on the floor for that team, which is much better than the current Northwestern team. They do have an egregious loss. They did lose to 194 UMass. I don't really have anything to say about that or any explanation. But you look comparatively, Loyola's 1-5 against top 100 teams. Their only win is against St. Joseph. They also have a questionable loss to 189 to Oakland. So it's a very similar resume, except at the top. Dayton has these premier wins that Loyola just flat out does not. Like Dayton played North Carolina to overtime, which North Carolina is not fantastic. But I mean, we're talking about an A-10 team here, not Auburn. Stylistically, Dayton is a little taller than Loyola, but actually rebounding, interior scoring looks almost identical. So Loyola playing a little more effectively with their height. The only major difference in anything height related is Loyola is 85th in interior defense and Dayton is outside the top 200, which really surprises me considering their personnel. But it is what it is. Shooting wise, Dayton has slight edges. They're 65th in effective field goal, 58th from three. Loyola is 96th on effective field goal, 126th from three. And then Loyola has the overall defensive advantage, but I think Dayton is a little bit sneaky in this regard. They actually outperformed Loyola in turnover margin. That was a huge influence in the first matchup, and they just have better players straight up. Dayton draws more fouls, and foul trouble has been a problem for Loyola for most of the season. So this is when we actually make just slightly outside the number. The current spread is 2 points in favor of Dayton on the road. The total is 141. I took the -1 at open. I still think a 2 is okay, but we are making this a little closer to like a 1.5. Just stylistically, kind of a tough matchup for Loyola, and Dayton has showed some of the highs that really no one else in the country has, especially at the A10 level of competition. If you ever want to get these early, I'll highlight the Discord just briefly. We're taking these mostly at open and throughout the day. So this video is not comprehensive of everything we're taking and playing. We're projecting every game, scores, totals, all the way down to the player level for the major games. That includes points, rebounds, assists, blocks, steals, whatever you could possibly imagine, minutes. It's available in the Discord. I'll link it below. It's only $10 for a week, $30 for a month. No long-term commitments. I'm working on a pretty cool March Madness tool that I hope you guys will like. But if you have any questions, let me know. I'm on Twitter at Matt_Gajewski too. All right. Kent State, Miami, Ohio. We're at the top of the MAC. Everyone's chasing Akron in this league, who's undefeated in league play. Pretty crazy season from them. Kent State is +2. The total is 130 or 143. Again, Kent State versus Miami, Ohio. In this contest, we have a rematch from January 18th. Miami, Ohio won 70-61. They were on the road. They held Kent State to 14% from three, which is pretty wild. So, yeah, I mean, both these teams have limitations. It's kind of the battle of who's going to chase down Akron. I'm not sure that we have anything we can look at confidently in that matchup, but let's keep it here. Kent State is 1-4 against top 100 teams. They beat Arkansas State, who's number 90. The MAC had the Sun Belt crossover. What was it? A week ago? 2 weeks ago? I don't remember, but every MAC team played another Sun Belt team in conference play, which was cool. I love when conferences do this. But outside of that win against number 90 Arkansas State, they have two horrid losses. They lost to Ball State at 270. They lost to Western Michigan at 298. But it's not all that different for Miami, Ohio, who's the favored team in this game. They're 0-3 against top 100 teams. However, they did beat 103 Troy, who's right on the edge there. They also have two egregious losses. They lost to 298 Western Michigan as well and 295 Eastern Michigan. The only thing that gives me pause is those two losses were in their last two games. Like, what is going on with Miami, Ohio? Stylistically, Kent State is a very weird team. They're 297th in effective height, but somehow they're 76th in rebounding. Miami, Ohio is the exact opposite. They're 135th in effective height, but 221st in rebounding. So it's very counterintuitive that the smaller team is the much better rebounding team. But from here, this is just a nasty clash of styles. Kent State cannot shoot at all. The problem is Miami, Ohio can't defend. Conversely, Miami, Ohio is 48th in effective field goal percentage, but Kent State is a top 70 defense across the board. No major weakness anywhere for this team. So you have the awesome shooting team playing the awesome defense. You have the horrible shooting team playing the horrible defense. What wins out? Well, in the first game, the horrible defense was able to hold Kent State to 14% from three. So I'm not sure. I will say both teams do force a ton of turnovers, and both teams are not very good with their turnovers committed. This has the chance to be a sloppy and volatile game, especially considering it's strength on strength, weakness on weakness. We show some value on Kent State. We make this closer to -1 in favor of Miami, Ohio. But I'm not really trying to dip my toes into any more of these volatile games, at least for the time being. Like I got bit by Texas A&M earlier in the week. I bet a lot of these teams, especially on the road, like these teams that just can't shoot. This is more of a stylistic preference for how I want to play the board, but I'm going to stay away. And if this gets to 3 or something, I'll have to reconsider. But right now, for the volatile teams, for the time being, I'm just going to need a few more points than the models project. Just it's a preference thing. I don't really have the stomach for watching Kent State throw up bricks for 40 minutes. Anyway, let's go to our last game. It is in the Horizon. Crazy logjam at the top of the Horizon. We had a lot of outcomes on Sunday last week with implications for this league. So here's just the standings in the Horizon. Currently in first place, you have Cleveland. I'm going to give you conference records, not overall. Cleveland State at 1, they're 12-4. We have a pair of teams at 12-5. That's Robert Morris and Youngstown State. Milwaukee's at 11-5, and Purdue Fort Wayne is at 11-6. So obviously, this is a very big matchup between two teams at the top of the Horizon. That's just a crazy logjam. And we currently have a 1.5 point spread in favor of Youngstown State, the home team, 152.5 total. Only injury in the game is Faison Fields, who's playing through a hand injury. He had previously been a starter. They moved him to the bench, getting single digits, 12 minutes, somewhere in that range for Faison Fields, but he is impactful. This is a rematch from January 17th. UW-Milwaukee won at home 79-64. EJ Farmer did not play for Youngstown State, which is impactful, but this is the craziest game. I mean, kind of a historic game. UW-Milwaukee shot 0% from three and 46% from the free throw line. Now, they only had 5 3-point attempts, so that needs to be contextualized a little bit, but they did shoot a ton of free throws, and they ended up demolishing Youngstown. Now, part of the reason is Youngstown only shot 21% from three, but they had a lot more attempts. They had 24 attempts. So those errors were more costly than Milwaukee, who just didn't shoot a ton. And I don't know. That was just an absolutely atrocious game. Youngstown State basically got shut down across the board, which is weird to me because Milwaukee's not that tall. And Youngstown State has a 7'3" center, Gabe Dines. With that said, Milwaukee is a massive rebounding edge. This team is first nationally in total rebounding percentage, second in offensive rebounding percentage. Level of competition at least needs to be discussed. Like, if they played a harder schedule, no, they wouldn't be number one. But they're still running laps around everyone on the glass in this league. So even with Dines on the floor, I think Milwaukee still, effort-wise, has a lot of advantages on the glass in this game. And from there, Milwaukee's over 100 spots ahead of Youngstown State in effective field goal percentage, 90 spots ahead in three-point percentage, which is saying a lot because Milwaukee's not the best shooting team. But Youngstown State is poorly coached, in my opinion, completely unaware of their weaknesses. This is the opposite of Michigan State. Youngstown State is 324th in three-point percentage, but they're 39th in the country in three-point rate. You have a 7'3" center. Why are you shooting so many threes when you're so bad at them? I don't know. It's Youngstown State. I'm not sure what's going on. Defensively, Youngstown State does hold an edge across the board that extends to turnover margin. Milwaukee's not always the most careful with the ball, but those gaps aren't as wide as the gaps we have in favor of Milwaukee on the offensive end. So we actually make this about a pick'em. We have the slightest of edges to Youngstown State, but overall, Milwaukee at +1.5 is a pretty strong value against the spread in this situation. So we will back them and see where this goes throughout the day. The last one I didn't have time to actually write all the way up. It did take was Dartmouth against Penn at -1. I believe it's actually moved against me. So it's probably a good thing didn't bring it up. Yeah, they're +1.5 now. We'll have to look into that and see what's going on with the injuries. But that'll do it for us today. We'll be back hopefully tomorrow, moving around a little bit this weekend, traveling. If you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, good luck, and we'll see you next time.